Shout at me again and I'll end you, poor Waitress warned Mafia boss. What he did next will shock. He owned half the city. She owned nothing but a second-hand apron and a tired pair of shoes. When he slammed his glass on the table and shouted in her face, everyone looked down. But she didn't. And when she said those 7 words, the most feared man in the city forgot how to breathe. The Blue Harbor Grill sat between a pawn shop and a shuttered movie theater on 9th Street in South Boston. The neon sign buzzed like it was tired of shining. Inside, the booths were cracked red vinyl, the coffee was strong enough to wake the dead, and the regulars tipped in coins they counted twice. Lena Morales had worked there for 3 years, 2 months, and 6 days. She knew the number because she'd been saving for exactly that long. Not for a car, not for clothes, for an exit. Lena was 27, 5'3", with dark hair she twisted into a loose knot when the dinner rush began. She had a nursing certificate folded inside a kitchen drawer at home. She had a father who used to work the docks until his back gave out and pain became a daily roommate. His medication cost $780 a month. Her rent for a 1-bedroom she shared with him was $1,050. Her paycheck was $11, $25 an hour plus tips. She didn't complain. She memorized orders. She wiped tables before customers noticed crumbs. She refilled coffee without being asked. Her manager, old Mrs. Donnelly, liked to say, "Kindness is free. Regret is expensive." Lena believed that. Even on nights when her feet burned and her phone buzzed with another overdue notice. On a rainy Friday in late October, the kind where the streets looked like spilled ink, 3 black SUVs pulled up outside Blue Harbor Grill. The room shifted before the door even opened. Conversation softened. Shoulders tightened. Mrs. Donnelly stopped counting change mid-stack. "Lena," she said quietly, "take table 7. Table 7 was the back corner booth. The one nobody else ever sat in. The one with a direct view of both exits. "I've got 4 tables, Lena whispered. "I know." The door opened, and Victor Marino walked in like the air belonged to him. In South Boston, the name Victor Marino carried weight. It meant construction contracts no one else could bid on. It meant nightclubs that never closed and debts that always got collected. It meant city officials who smiled too quickly when he entered a room. He was 45. Broad shoulders, dark suit without a tie, silver at his temples that made him look distinguished instead of dangerous. His watch flashed under the lights, the kind that cost more than Lena's yearly rent. 2 men followed him. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Victor slid into table 7 without looking around. He didn't scan the room. He assumed the room had already scanned him. Lena approached with her notepad and her usual steady smile. "Good evening. Can I start you with something to drink?" He didn't look up from his phone. "Sparkling water, no ice, and the steak, rare." "Of course." She moved quickly. She always did. But her stomach felt tight. Not fear exactly. More like standing too close to a moving train. When she returned with the water, he lifted the glass, took 1 sip, and placed it down carefully. "This is flat," he said. Lena blinked. She had opened it seconds ago. "I'm sorry, sir. I can bring another bottle." "I don't want another bottle," he said, finally looking at her. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "I want it right." She replaced it anyway. The steak came out perfect, at least to her eyes. Pink center, warm plate. He cut into it. Chewed once. Overcooked. A hush settled over the room. The couple at table 3 suddenly found their mashed potatoes fascinating. Lena swallowed. "It's rare, sir." He set the knife down. "Are you correcting me?" "No, I'm explaining." His jaw tightened slightly. "Don't." The word wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The 2 men behind him shifted in their seats. Lena felt heat rise to her cheeks. She thought of her father at home, sitting in his worn recliner, pretending not to wince when he stood. She thought of the overdue pharmacy bill. She thought of how tired she was of swallowing things that weren't her fault. Victor leaned forward. "Do you know who I am?" She did not, and somehow that made her braver. "Do you know who I am?" he repeated. The entire restaurant felt suspended. Rain tapped against the windows. A fork clinked softly somewhere in the silence. Lena looked at him fully for the first time, not at the suit, not at the watch, at his face. "I know you're a customer," she said evenly. "And I know I'm doing my job." One of the men behind him stood halfway up. Victor lifted a single finger without turning around. The man sat back down. He studied her now like something unfamiliar had entered the room. "You're arguing," he said quietly. "I'm not," she replied. "I'm trying to help." His voice rose just enough to carry. "Help by serving bad food and flat water." The glass slipped from someone's hand at the counter and shattered. No one bent to clean it. Lena's heart hammered. She could walk away, apologize, comp the meal. But something inside her, something worn thin from years of scraping by, refused to bend. He stood up abruptly, towering over her. "Get your manager," he snapped. Mrs. Donnelly froze behind the counter, and that's when Lena stepped closer instead of back. The distance between them shrank to inches. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "Shout at me again," she said softly, "and I'll end you." The words weren't a threat of violence. They were something else, something deeper. The restaurant went completely silent. Victor Marino, a man who had been yelled at by rivals, interrogated by federal agents, feared by grown men, stared at a waitress earning $11 an hour. No one had spoken to him like that in 20 years, not without consequences. His eyes darkened, then something flickered there, not anger, recognition. And for a brief second he looked tired. The silence stretched so long it began to feel heavy. Victor's jaw flexed. His men waited for a signal. Lena didn't move. Up close, she noticed something she hadn't before, faint lines around his eyes, not from smiling, from strain. He slowly sat back down. "Explain," he said. The room exhaled softly. "You're not angry about steak," Lena said, "or water." The pulse pounded in her ears, but she continued. "You're angry because something else feels out of control." A dangerous thing to say. One of his men muttered, "Boss." Victor cut him off with a glance. "And you think you understand me?" Victor asked. "No," she said honestly, "but I understand stress. I live with it every day." He leaned back, studying her like a puzzle piece that didn't belong. "My father can't walk without pain," she continued quietly. "His medication costs more than I make some weeks, so if the steak's wrong, I'll fix it. But yelling won't fix whatever else is bothering you." The words hung between them. It wasn't defiance now. It was truth, and truth lands differently. Victor looked down at his plate. For the first time, his shoulders lowered slightly. "Sit," he said. She hesitated. "I'm working." That wasn't a suggestion, but his tone had changed. The edge was gone. Against every sensible instinct, Lena slid into the booth across from him. The entire restaurant watched history tilt in a direction no one expected. Victor folded his hands on the table. "My son," he said after a long pause, "hasn't spoken to me in 8 months." The confession didn't sound like power. It sounded like loss. And suddenly, the most feared man in South Boston looked like a father who didn't know how to fix what he'd broken. "My son," Victor repeated, staring at the untouched steak. "He thinks I ruin everything I touch." The words didn't sound like a confession. They sounded like a bruise. Lena sat very still. She had never imagined sharing a booth with a man whose name people whispered. But in that moment, he wasn't a headline. He was just a father speaking into a silence that had grown too large. "How old is he?" she asked softly. 17. She nodded. "That's a hard age." He let out a short breath that might have been a laugh, if laughter still lived there. "He wants to go to art school," Victor said. "Paintings, sculptures, things that don't build buildings or make money. And you don't approve." "I built an empire from nothing," he said, "so he wouldn't have to struggle. And he calls it blood money." The word lingered. The men at the counter pretended not to hear. Lena folded her hands on the table. "Maybe he doesn't hate what you built," she said carefully. "Maybe he's afraid of becoming it." Victor's eyes lifted sharply. "No one talks to me like this," he said. "I know," she replied. The rain outside intensified, streaking down the windows like tears the sky refused to hide. "My father used to be strong," Lena said after a pause. "He worked double shifts at the docks, never missed a day. Then one morning he couldn't get out of bed. I hated seeing him weak." Victor listened without interrupting. "But he wasn't weak," she continued. "He was human, and I realized something. Strength isn't about control. It's about showing up when things fall apart." Victor looked down at his hands, hands that had signed deals, shaken alliances, commanded rooms, hands that had never apologized to his son. "And shouting," Lena added gently, "won't make him listen." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Victor reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He stared at the screen. The entire restaurant held its breath again, and then, slowly, he pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Victor almost hung up. Then a voice answered, What? Teenage, guarded, distant. Victor's posture changed in a way Lena hadn't expected. His shoulders lowered, his voice softened by several degrees. "It's me," he said, silence on the other end. "I know," the boy replied flatly. Victor glanced at Lena for half a second, as if steadying himself. "I'm at dinner," he said, "and I realized something." Another silence. "I don't want to fight anymore." The words felt fragile in the air. The boy scoffed faintly. "You don't fight, you decide." Victor swallowed. "You're right," he said. The admission was small, but it cracked something open. "I should have listened," he continued. "About the art school, about everything." The men at the counter stared at their drinks. Mrs. Donnelly pretended to wipe the same spot on the counter for 2 full minutes. "You told me real men don't waste time on paint," the boy said quietly. Victor closed his eyes briefly. "I was wrong." Lena felt her throat tighten. "I don't want you to be me," Victor said. "I want you to be you." The rain softened outside, as if even the storm was listening. The boy's voice changed, not warm, not yet, but less sharp. "You mean that?" "Yes." Another pause. "I have an exhibit next week," the boy said. "Small gallery downtown." Victor blinked. "You never told me. You never asked." That one landed hard. Victor nodded slowly, even though his son couldn't see him. "When is it?" "Thursday, 6. I'll be there." Silence again. "Okay," the boy whispered. The line went quiet. Victor lowered the phone. He didn't look powerful. He looked relieved, like a man who had just stepped back from an edge he didn't realize he was standing on. The tension in the restaurant shifted into something softer. Victor placed the phone on the table and stared at it like it might disappear. "You think he'll believe me?" he asked. "Not tonight," Lena said honestly, "but maybe he'll watch." Victor nodded slowly. Trust, she knew, wasn't built in speeches. It was built in showing up. He looked at his steak again. "It's actually fine," he admitted quietly. A faint smile touched Lena's lips. "I thought so." One of his men chuckled under his breath, quickly stopping when Victor glanced back. Victor reached into his wallet. He pulled out several $100 bills and placed them on the table. "For your father," he said. Lena's stomach tightened. "I can't take that." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing to me." Their eyes met again, this time not in challenge, but in understanding. "If you want to help," she said gently, "come back Thursday, after the exhibit. Tell me how it went." Victor studied her. "You're refusing me. I'm choosing something else." A long pause. Then, unexpectedly, Victor gathered the money and slipped it back into his wallet. "Thursday," he said. He stood, adjusting his jacket. The 2 men rose instantly. As he walked toward the door, the room parted slightly, not out of fear now, but curiosity. At the entrance he paused, turned, and nodded once at Lena, not a command, not ownership, acknowledgement. The SUVs pulled away minutes later. The restaurant slowly found its voice again. Mrs. Donnelly approached Lena with wide eyes. "Are you out of your mind?" she whispered. Lena exhaled shakily. "Probably." But inside, she felt something steady. Not power, not pride, just the quiet strength of not backing down from truth. And she had no idea that Thursday would change more than one life. Thursday came faster than Lena expected. She worked the early shift that night, glancing at the clock more often than usual. At 6:12 p.m., the bell above the diner door chimed. Victor walked in alone. No SUVs, no bodyguards, just a man in a simple dark coat. The room went still again, but differently this time. He approached the counter instead of table 7. "Coffee," he said. Lena poured it. He took a sip. "It's perfect," he said. She waited. He looked at her, and for the first time there was something close to a smile. "I went," he said. Her chest tightened. "And he paints storms," Victor said quietly. "Big canvases, dark skies, but there's always light breaking through somewhere." Lena felt tears press at the corners of her eyes. "I didn't understand it," Victor admitted, "but I stood there for 2 hours, and I listened." "And he introduced me," Victor said, voice catching slightly. "As his father." The word lingered between them. The most feared man in South Boston looked like he'd been handed something priceless. "I didn't deserve that," he added. "Maybe you're becoming someone who does," Lena said. He nodded slowly. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Storm clouds gathered again in the distance. But inside the Blue Harbor Grill, something had shifted permanently. A man who once ruled through fear had chosen something else, and it had started with a waitress who refused to be shouted at. Weeks passed. Victor came in every Thursday, Alone, he ordered coffee, sometimes pie. He asked about Lena's father. He never raised his voice again. Word spread quietly through the neighborhood, not about threats or power moves, but about something stranger. Victor Marino was changing. He funded a small art scholarship under a different name. He started showing up at community events he used to ignore. People didn't trust it at first. Men like him didn't shift. But he did. Not loudly, not dramatically, just consistently. One night, as he stood to leave, he paused beside Lena. "You saved something," he said quietly. "I didn't save anything," she replied. "You reminded me who I was before I got lost." That felt heavier than any tip. He slid a small envelope across the counter. She hesitated. "It's not money," he said. Inside was a business card, on the back a number. "For your nursing certification," he said. "A friend runs a hospital program. Call her." Lena stared at the card. "Why?" she asked. Because someone change did not arrive with headlines. There were no newspaper articles about Victor Marino becoming softer. No dramatic confessions on television. In neighborhoods like South Boston, change moved quietly, like tidewater shifting under a dock. People noticed. He stopped arriving with convoys, one car, sometimes none. He would walk from 3 blocks away. He began paying old debts that weren't written on paper. A mechanic whose shop had nearly closed. A bakery owner who once borrowed money at the wrong time. He didn't erase his past. He adjusted its direction. Still, not everyone believed it. One Tuesday night, Lena stepped out after her shift and found 2 unfamiliar men leaning against a car across the street. Not Victor's usual associates. They watched her too long. Her pulse quickened. Inside, Victor sat finishing his coffee. She debated saying nothing. She didn't want protection. She didn't want to owe anyone. Before she could decide, one of the men crossed halfway into the street. Victor noticed first. His body shifted, instinct, not ego. He stood and walked outside without hurry. The men straightened. "You've been hard to reach," one of them said. "I've been busy," Victor replied calmly. "With what? Charity work?" The man smirked. Victor glanced at Lena briefly, then back at them. "With my son." The words carried weight. "There are people who don't like the direction you're heading," the other man said. Victor nodded once. "There always are." The tension felt different from the diner confrontation months earlier. This wasn't about pride. It was about choice. "You can't rewrite what you are," the first man warned. Victor's gaze didn't waver. "No," he agreed quietly, "but I can decide what I become." The men left without another word. Lena exhaled slowly. "You didn't have to step outside," she said. "Yes," he replied gently. "I did." For the first time, she understood something deeper. Change is not soft. It's brave. And sometimes bravery means standing in the cold so someone else doesn't have to. Winter deepened. The city felt smaller under snow. One evening, Lena arrived home to find her father sitting unusually still in his recliner. His breathing was shallow. The medication had been adjusted, and the side effects were heavier than expected. Fear moved through her fast and sharp. She called the number on the back of Victor's card, not because she wanted favor, because she was out of options. The hospital program director answered within 2 rings. By morning, her father had a new specialist appointment. By afternoon, financial paperwork that once seemed impossible began to untangle. Victor never mentioned it. He showed up Thursday as usual, ordered coffee, and listened while Lena spoke about the doctor visit. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. He shook his head. "You already did." "For what?" "For reminding me that fear doesn't get the final word." He stared into his cup. "My son asked me something last night," he added. "What?" "He said, 'Who are you when no one's afraid of you?'" Lena felt that land deeply. "And what did you tell him?" Victor looked up. "I said I'm still figuring that out." The diner lights flickered softly overhead. For the first time, Victor Marino did not seem like a man rebuilding reputation. He seemed like a man rebuilding identity. And those are very different things. Spring approached slowly. Snow melted into gray puddles along sidewalks. The air felt lighter. Lena began her hospital training 2 days a week. The diner shifts grew fewer. Mrs. Donnelly hugged her longer each time. "You were meant for more," the older woman said. "I was meant to survive," Lena replied gently. "The rest is a gift." Victor attended his son's second exhibit. This time he didn't stand in the back. He stood beside him. Photos circulated quietly online, nothing flashy. just a father and son in front of a canvas filled with storm clouds breaking open to light. Victor showed Lena one of the pictures on his phone. "He paints hope better than I ever built it," Victor said. "You didn't build hope," Lena replied. "You built walls, he's painting windows." Victor smiled at that. But not everything was easy. Old associates drifted away. Some partnerships dissolved. There were costs to changing direction. One evening, Victor admitted it plainly. "I may lose more than I gain." "Maybe," Lena said, "but you'll keep what matters." He nodded. In that moment, she realized something powerful. Transformation is expensive, but regret costs more. The final shift came on a warm Thursday evening. Lena tied her apron for the last time. The Blue Harbor grill hummed as it always had, plates clinking, coffee pouring, ordinary life unfolding. Victor sat at table 7 again. "No steak tonight," she teased gently. "Just coffee," he said, "and goodbye." The word settled heavily. She slid into the booth across from him, the same way she had months earlier when everything shifted. "You were never afraid of me," he said quietly. "I was," she admitted. "I just didn't let it decide for me." He nodded. "That night, when you said you'd end me, I meant I'd end the yelling," she clarified softly. "Not you." "I know," he said. Silence lingered between them, not uncomfortable, full. "You didn't just change your life," Victor added. "You changed mine." Lena shook her head. "You chose to change." He stood and reached into his coat. For a brief second, memory flashed, the envelope of money she refused. This time he placed something else on the table. A small framed photograph. His son at the exhibit. Storm breaking open with light. On the back, handwritten, "Strength is listening." "For your new office," he said. Her eyes filled. He extended his hand. She took it. No fear, no power imbalance, just two people who had witnessed each other at a turning point. As he walked toward the door, the bell chimed softly, the same sound as always, but it felt different. Months later, Lena stood in hospital scrubs beneath bright fluorescent lights. The work was exhausting, the hours long, but it was purposeful. Her father's health stabilized. Slowly, imperfectly, but steadily. On a quiet afternoon, a bouquet of white lilies arrived at the nurse's station. No card, just a small note tucked inside. "Storms pass. Light stays." She didn't need a signature. Across the city, Victor sat in a small gallery again, this time surrounded by parents who once feared him and now simply nodded. He was not perfect. He was not forgiven by everyone, but he was present, and sometimes presence is redemption. The truth